The 200 Watchers, angels who abandoned heaven for human women. Long before the flood destroyed the world, before God looked upon his creation and regretted making mankind, before the earth became so corrupt that only 8 souls would survive, there was a forbidden union, a cosmic transgression so catastrophic it would alter the course of human history forever. 200 angels descended from heaven, not in rebellion like Lucifer, not in war like the fallen host, but in desire, in lust, in an unholy craving for something they were never meant to have, human women. The Book of Enoch, removed from the biblical canon and banned by church councils, tells their story in explicit, disturbing detail. These were not minor angels. These were watchers, celestial beings assigned by God to observe humanity, to guard them, to guide them from a distance. But observation turned to obsession, distance became desire, and guardianship transformed into the most forbidden love affair in history. Their leader was Semyaza, a powerful angel who made a terrible calculation. He knew that what he desired was evil. He knew that to act on it would bring divine wrath. But he also knew he did not want to face that wrath alone, so he gathered 200 angels, each one assigned to watch over humanity, and he made them take an oath, a blood covenant, a binding vow that would ensure they would all fall together or stand together. They swore on Mount Hermon. They descended to earth, and they took human wives. What happened next would give birth to giants. It would unleash forbidden knowledge upon an unprepared world. It would corrupt the entire human race, and it would force God himself to decide that his creation had become so twisted, so polluted, so irredeemable, that it all had to be washed away. This is not mythology. This is not legend. This is the forbidden chapter of Genesis that most people never read. Genesis 6:1-4 mentions it briefly. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. 4 verses. That is all the canonical Bible gives us. But the Book of Enoch dedicates entire chapters to this event. It names the angels, it describes their crimes, it details their teachings, and it reveals the horrifying consequences of their actions. Tonight, you will learn the names of the 200. You will discover what forbidden knowledge they taught humanity. You will witness the birth of the Nephilim, hybrid monsters that terrorize the ancient world. And you will understand why God had no choice but to cleanse the earth with water and fury. This is the story the church did not want you to know. The forbidden truth about the watchers who fell not from pride, but from lust. Let us descend. In the beginning, when God created humanity, he did not leave them unprotected. The world was young, dangerous, and filled with mysteries that mortal minds could not comprehend. Demons prowled the shadows. Spiritual forces moved unseen. And humanity, fragile and innocent, needed guardians. So God assigned angels to watch over them. These were not ordinary angels. They were called the Watchers, celestial beings specifically tasked with observing humanity from heaven, intervening when necessary, protecting them from threats they could not see. They were the bridge between the divine realm and the human world, the eyes of God watching over his beloved creation. The Book of Enoch describes them as tall, radiant beings who could take physical form when needed. They appeared to prophets. They delivered messages. They fought off demonic attacks. They were humanity's unseen protectors, operating in the space between heaven and earth, loyal servants of the Most High. But there was a danger in their assignment, a risk God must have known existed but allowed anyway. The Watchers were not meant to interact closely with humans. They were meant to observe, to watch from a distance, to remain separate. But proximity breeds familiarity, and familiarity can breed desire. As the watchers observed humanity, they began to notice something. Human women were beautiful. Not with the eternal, transcendent beauty of angels, but with something different, something mortal, fleeting, and precisely because of that, intoxicating. They aged, they laughed, they cried, they loved, they died. Everything about them was temporary, fragile, precious in a way that immortal beings could never be. And the watchers, who had existed for eons in the unchanging perfection of heaven, found themselves drawn to that mortality. They began to desire what they could never have. They began to want what was forbidden. Among them was Samyaza, one of the chiefs of the watchers. Enoch describes him as powerful, intelligent, and fatally flawed. He looked upon the daughters of men and felt something angels were never supposed to feel: lust, not love, not compassion, but raw, consuming desire to possess them, to know them, to experience what it meant to join with a mortal being. But Samyaza was not foolish. He knew what he wanted was forbidden. He knew that if he descended alone and took a human wife, God would punish him. He would fall like Lucifer fell. He would be cast out, transformed into a demon, locked away in darkness forever. So he made a plan. If he was going to fall, he would not fall alone. He would recruit others, and if enough angels fell together, perhaps they could protect each other. Perhaps their combined power could shield them from divine retribution, or perhaps, at the very least, he would have company in his damnation. Samyaza gathered the other watchers. He spoke to them of the beauty of human women. He painted pictures of what it would be like to experience mortality, to feel flesh against flesh, to father children, to build kingdoms on earth. And slowly, carefully, he convinced them. But he required one thing: an oath, a binding covenant that none of them could break, because Samyaza feared that once they descended, some might repent, some might return to heaven and report the others. So he demanded that all 200 angels swear a mutual curse upon themselves. If they did this, they would all do it together. If they fell, they would all fall together. And on Mount Hermon, whose name means cursed mountain, 200 angels took an oath that would doom them all. Mount Hermon stands at the border of ancient Israel and Syria, a towering peak covered in snow, even in summer. It was here, according to the book of Enoch, that the oath was taken. 200 angels gathered in physical form, standing in a circle, swearing by the name of God himself that they would commit the very act that would separate them from him forever. The irony is almost unbearable. They swore by God to betray God. They invoked his name to curse themselves. They used the authority he gave them to rebel against his commands. Enoch records the names of the leaders: Samyaza, the chief; Azazel, who would become synonymous with the scapegoat and rebellion; Amaros, teacher of counterspells; Barakiel, teacher of astrology; Kokabiel, instructor of constellations; Tamiel, corrupter of spirits; Ramiel, whom God set over those who rise; Danel, teacher of metallurgy; Ezekiel, instructor of knowledge; Sariel, teacher of the moon's course, and many others, each one a powerful angel with a specific domain of knowledge, each one about to betray their sacred trust. The oath taken, they descended. Not in violent rebellion like Lucifer's host, but slowly, deliberately, savoring every moment of their descent from heaven to earth. They took physical form, tall, impossibly beautiful, radiating an otherworldly power that no human could resist. And they chose their wives. The Book of Enoch does not sugarcoat what happened. These were not love stories. These were not romances between celestial beings and mortal women. The text uses the word took. The angels took wives. They chose whomever they desired, and human women, faced with beings of overwhelming beauty and power, had little choice in the matter. Some ancient rabbinical texts suggest that the women went willingly, seduced by the angel's appearance and promises of power. Others suggest coercion, that mortal women could not truly consent to beings so far beyond their understanding. Either way, the unions were consummated. Angels and humans joined in an act that violated the very order of creation. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The women became pregnant. But these were not normal pregnancies. The children growing within them were hybrids, part angel, part human, the divine mixing with the mortal, the eternal corrupting the temporal. And as these children grew in the womb, the mothers realized something was terribly wrong. The babies were too large, too strong. They moved with unnatural power, kicking with force that should have been impossible. Some ancient texts claim that the women screamed in agony, their bodies unable to contain what grew inside them. Others say the angels used their power to sustain the pregnancies, keeping the mothers alive through supernatural means. When the children were born, the world changed forever. They emerged not as infants, but as giants, the Nephilim, beings of immense size and strength, with the appetites of demons and the intelligence of angels. They grew rapidly, reaching adulthood in years rather than decades, and they were hungry. The Watchers, now fully committed to their rebellion, did not stop with taking wives. They began to teach humanity things that were never meant to be known. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and armor, turning humanity into warriors. Armoros taught counterspells and enchantments. Barachiel taught astrology, using the stars to predict the future and manipulate destiny. Kokabiel taught forbidden astronomy. Tamiel taught how to see and manipulate spirits. Knowledge that God had kept hidden was now unleashed upon an unprepared world, and humanity, armed with weapons and dark wisdom, began to destroy itself. The Watchers had not just fallen, they had corrupted everything they touched. The Nephilim were abominations, hybrids that should never have existed, the offspring of angels and humans. They were neither one nor the other, but something twisted, something wrong, something that violated the very fabric of creation. The Book of Enoch describes them as giants of enormous height. Some traditions say they were 10 feet tall, others claim 20. The more extreme texts suggest heights of 300 cubits, over 400 feet. Regardless of the exact measurement, they were massive, towering over ordinary humans like adults tower over insects. But their size was not their only horrifying trait. They possessed supernatural strength inherited from their angelic fathers. A single Nephilim could tear apart a human with bare hands. They could uproot trees. They could throw boulders like pebbles. They were living weapons, and they knew it. At first, perhaps there was awe. Humans must have looked upon these giants with wonder, maybe even worship. The children of angels walking among them, how could they not be special? How could they not be destined for greatness? But the Nephilim were not benevolent. They were cursed with the worst traits of both their parents, the pride and power of angels combined with the mortality and appetites of humans. They wanted, they craved, they consumed, and they had the strength to take whatever they desired. The text of Enoch describes their hunger in horrifying terms. They ate everything. They consumed the produce of men's labor, devouring entire harvests in days. When the food ran out, they turned to animals, slaughtering livestock, hunting creatures to extinction. And when the animals were gone, some traditions say they turned to something even darker. They began to eat humans, cannibalism, the ultimate taboo. The Nephilim, driven by insatiable hunger and viewing ordinary humans as lesser beings, began to consume them. The text is vague, perhaps deliberately so, but the implication is clear. These giants saw humanity not as kin, not as the race their mothers came from, but as prey, and they bred. The Nephilim took human wives just as their fathers had, creating a second generation of hybrids. Some of these were called the Eliud, mighty men, warriors, demigods. Genesis 6:4 mentions them briefly. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. This suggests that even after the flood, traces of their bloodline survived. The world became a nightmare. Imagine living in a time when giants walked the earth, when creatures of impossible strength ruled through terror, when the very laws of nature had been violated. Ordinary humans were reduced to cattle, prey for beings they could not fight, could not escape, could not even comprehend. But the corruption went deeper than physical violence. The Nephilim inherited knowledge from their angelic fathers, secrets of heaven, spiritual insights, supernatural abilities. Some could manipulate spirits, others could use dark magic. They became sorcerers, warlords, tyrants, ruling over territories with combinations of physical might and occult power. Ancient mythology is filled with echoes of them. The Greek Titans, the Norse Jotnar, the Sumerian Anunnaki. Cultures around the world have legends of giants, of demigods, of beings who were more than human, but not quite divine. These may all be distant memories of the Nephilim, stories passed down through generations, distorted by time, but rooted in a horrifying truth. And God watched. He saw what his angels had done. He saw the corruption spreading like cancer through his creation. He saw humanity, the beings he had made in his own image, being devoured by monsters. And he made a decision. The Nephilim could not be allowed to exist. The genetic pollution they represented threatened to corrupt all of humanity. If their bloodline spread too far, there would be no pure humans left, no one worthy of redemption, no one who could be saved. The world had to be cleansed, washed clean, reset, and only one family would survive. The physical corruption of the Nephilim was only part of the catastrophe. The Watchers did not just defile humanity through forbidden unions. They corrupted the human mind and soul by teaching knowledge that was never meant to be revealed. The Book of Enoch lists the teachings in explicit detail, and they read like a blueprint for civilization's darkest arts. Azazel, one of the chief watchers, taught men the art of war. Before him, humans knew conflict, but not organized slaughter. Azazel showed them how to forge swords from metal, how to craft shields and armor, how to create instruments of death. He transformed scattered tribes into armies. He turned disagreements into wars. Violence became systematic, calculated, efficient. Blood flowed in rivers, but Azazel taught more than warfare. He instructed women in the arts of seduction and vanity. He revealed the secrets of cosmetics, how to paint the face, how to enhance beauty artificially, how to use appearance as a weapon. He taught the working of metals into jewelry and ornaments. Enoch's text frames this not as innocent beauty culture, but as deception, as the corruption of natural appearance, as the beginning of using sexuality as manipulation. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments, counter-magic, the ability to break curses and spells. This might sound beneficial, but it implied the existence of curses in the first place. He taught humanity to engage in spiritual warfare, to manipulate unseen forces, to battle in realms they were never meant to access. Barakiel taught astrology, the reading of stars to predict the future and determine destiny. This violated the principle of free will and trust in God. Instead of relying on divine providence, humans began to consult the heavens, to seek knowledge of the future, to believe that fate was written in the stars rather than in the heart. Kokabel taught the constellations and their meanings, expanding on Barakiel's work. The night sky became a map of destiny, a tool for divination, a replacement for faith. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of clouds, weather manipulation perhaps, or meteorology used for agricultural advantage or warfare, knowledge of natural phenomena that could be exploited. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar cycles connected to tides, to women's bodies, to planting seasons. Like astrology, this knowledge could be used to manipulate natural rhythms, to control rather than cooperate with creation. Shamshiel taught the signs of the sun, solar phenomena, eclipses, seasons. more power over nature, more independence from divine guidance. These teachings might seem innocuous, even beneficial. Agriculture improved, civilization advanced, humanity grew more sophisticated, more powerful, more knowledgeable. But Enoch presents this as corruption, not progress. Why? Because humanity was not ready. These were secrets of heaven, knowledge meant only for angels, revealed prematurely to beings who lacked the wisdom to use them properly. A child given a weapon will eventually hurt someone. Humanity, still in its spiritual infancy, was given weapons, magic, divination, and forbidden arts. The result was predictable. Violence escalated. Warfare became endemic. Magic spread, twisting into dark sorcery. Astrology evolved into idol worship. The knowledge given in pride was used in sin. Humanity, instead of growing closer to God through natural development, was artificially accelerated into technologies and practices that separated them from their Creator. The Watchers had not just taught forbidden knowledge. They had short-circuited human development, creating a civilization built on secrets stolen from heaven rather than wisdom earned through righteous living. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The corruption was total, physical, through the Nephilim, mental, through forbidden knowledge, spiritual, through the abandonment of divine law. The angels who were meant to protect humanity had instead destroyed it. And now, judgment was coming. The Book of Enoch contains one of the most haunting passages in all apocryphal literature. It describes the earth itself crying out to heaven. The land, soaked in blood from endless warfare, groaned under the weight of the Nephilim. The animals, hunted to near extinction, fled in terror. The humans, reduced to prey and slaves, lifted their voices in desperate prayer. And all of creation, the rocks, the trees, the rivers, screamed in anguish at what had been done to them. The earth made accusation, Enoch writes. The planet itself became a witness against the Watchers, testifying to the violence, the corruption, the violation of natural law. 4 archangels heard the cry. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, the highest angels in heaven, the commanders of God's celestial armies, stood before the throne of the Most High and reported what was happening on earth. They described the teachings of Azazel, who had revealed eternal secrets and taught humanity to commit sin. They spoke of Samyaza, who had corrupted the world through forbidden unions. They detailed the crimes of the Nephilim, the blood they had shed, the lives they had destroyed. And they asked a question that reverberates through all of human theology. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died cry out and make their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lament has ascended. How long will you tolerate this? How long will you watch injustice and do nothing? How long will evil prosper? How long before judgment comes? God's response was swift and absolute. The Watchers would be punished. The Nephilim would be destroyed, and the world would be cleansed. But first, the archangels were given specific assignments. Uriel was sent to warn Noah. A flood was coming, a deluge that would cover the entire earth, drowning every living thing except those protected in an ark. Noah, the only righteous man left in a corrupted world, would be given instructions to build a vessel and preserve a remnant, his family and pairs of every clean animal. Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel. Bind Azazel hand and foot, God ordered, and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. Place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever. Cover his face that he may not see light. Azazel, the teacher of war and vanity, was to be imprisoned in a desert pit, buried under stones, locked away in darkness until the final judgment. He would remain there, conscious, aware, unable to escape, tortured by isolation and the knowledge of his coming destruction. Gabriel was sent to destroy the Nephilim. "Go to the bastards, and to the reprobates, and to the children of fornication, and destroy the children of the watchers from amongst men. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle." God did not even need to intervene directly. The Nephilim, violent and proud, would be turned against each other. Their own aggression would become their downfall. They would war among themselves until none remained, and Michael was given the hardest task to deal with Samyaza and the rest of the Watchers. Bind them for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the day of judgment. The Watchers would not be killed. Death would be too merciful. Instead, they would be imprisoned in chains of darkness, buried deep in the earth, forced to watch as their children were destroyed, as the world they corrupted was washed clean, as everything they built crumbled to nothing, and they would remain there in torment until the final day, until the great white throne judgment, until they would be cast into the lake of fire for all eternity. The prayer of the earth was answered. Justice was coming. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. But what made him righteous? What separated him from everyone else in a world consumed by corruption? The answer is found in a single phrase from Genesis 6:9. Noah walked faithfully with God. But Enoch and other ancient texts add a crucial detail. Noah was genetically pure. His bloodline had not been corrupted by the Nephilim. In a world where angelic human hybrids had spread their genetics across most of humanity, Noah's family remained fully human. This is why God chose him, not just because he was morally good, but because he was genetically uncorrupted. If the Nephilim bloodline had infected all of humanity, there would be no one left to save, no pure human line through which the promised Messiah could eventually come. Noah received his instructions. Build an ark, massive beyond comprehension, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high, 3 decks, rooms for animals, sealed with pitch inside and out. It would take decades to build, and every day that Noah worked, he preached to a mocking world that refused to listen. The people laughed. They had seen the Nephilim, giants, warriors, beings of power. They had learned the secrets of the Watchers, warfare, magic, astrology. They thought themselves advanced, enlightened, powerful. Why would they fear a flood from a god they had mostly forgotten? But while Noah built, the archangels worked. Gabriel set the Nephilim against each other. Their pride, their territorial nature, their endless hunger for power, these became their downfall. Wars erupted between different clans of giants, battles that shook mountains, conflicts that lasted years. Slowly, methodically, they destroyed each other. Raphael bound Azazel in the desert of Dudael, casting him into a pit and covering him with jagged stones. The angel who had taught humanity to make weapons found himself imprisoned in darkness, powerless, screaming in rage that no one could hear. Michael and his angels rounded up the remaining Watchers. 200 angels who had descended in pride were now hunted like criminals. They were dragged to the valleys of the earth, deep places, hidden caverns, pits in the foundations of the world. There they were, bound with chains of darkness, imprisoned in cells of stone, locked away from light and hope. Enoch records that the Watchers begged him to intercede for them. They asked him to write a petition to God, requesting mercy, asking for forgiveness. Enoch agreed and presented their case before the throne of heaven. God's response was absolute. You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless ones. These you made known to the women in the hardness of your hearts, and by these mysteries women and men work much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace, no forgiveness, no redemption. The Watchers would remain imprisoned until Judgment Day, and then came the rain. Genesis describes it simply. All the springs of the great deep burst forth. and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Water from below and water from above, the world drowning from every direction. The Nephilim, for all their strength, could not breathe underwater. They tried to survive. Some traditions say they climbed mountains, gasping for air as the waters rose. Others say they tried to break into the ark, pounding on its sealed doors with superhuman strength. But nothing worked. They drowned, every last one. Giants reduced to corpses floating in an endless ocean. The corruption was washed away. The abominations were destroyed. But according to ancient Jewish texts, their spirits did not die with their bodies. When the Nephilim drowned, their spirits, neither angel nor human, had nowhere to go. They could not return to heaven. They could not descend to Sheol like human souls. So they remained on earth, wandering, bodiless, hungry. These became the demons, the evil spirits that plague humanity to this day, the disembodied souls of the Nephilim, forever seeking bodies to possess, forever hungry for the life they lost. The flood cleansed the earth, but the war was not over. The waters receded. Noah and his family emerged from the ark into a washed world. The Nephilim were gone. The Watchers were imprisoned. Humanity had been given a second chance. But the story did not end there. Genesis 6:4 contains a phrase that haunts every scholar who reads it carefully. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, after the flood. How? The texts offer several theories. Some suggest that one of Noah's sons married a woman who carried Nephilim genetics, unknowingly bringing the corruption through the flood. Others propose that some of the Watchers who were imprisoned had already fathered children in different locations, and those bloodlines survived in isolated pockets. The most disturbing theory comes from the Book of Jubilees, which suggests that the demons, the disembodied spirits of the drowned Nephilim, learned to influence human genetics, to manipulate bloodlines, to recreate their race through possession and corruption. Regardless of how it happened, the Bible confirms that giants appeared again after the flood. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, Goliath of Gath, 9 feet tall. Og, king of Bashan, whose bed was 13 feet long. The sons of Anak who made the Israelite spies feel like grasshoppers. These were remnants, echoes of the pre-flood corruption, and God commanded Israel to destroy them completely, men, women, and children. This seems harsh until you understand what they were. They were not just large humans, they were genetic abominations, carriers of corrupted bloodlines that threatened to pollute humanity again. The Watchers, still imprisoned in their dark cells, remained aware of the world above. The Book of Enoch describes them as being in torment, knowing that their children were destroyed, that their plans had failed, that their punishment was permanent. Jewish mysticism teaches that they will remain imprisoned until the final judgment. Revelation 20 speaks of Satan being bound for 1,000 years, then released for a short time before his final destruction. Some scholars connect this to the Watchers, suggesting that the end times will see their temporary release, a final attempt by the forces of evil to corrupt humanity before the ultimate judgment. But their true legacy is not physical, it is spiritual. The Watchers proved that even angels can fall. That proximity to God is no guarantee of faithfulness. That lust, pride, and desire can corrupt even the holiest beings. They also revealed the danger of forbidden knowledge. Every teaching they gave humanity, warfare, magic, astrology, vanity, seemed beneficial on the surface. Who doesn't want to defend themselves? Who doesn't want to know the future? Who doesn't want to be beautiful? But knowledge without wisdom is destruction. Technology without morality is catastrophe. Power without righteousness is tyranny. The Watchers gave humanity abilities they were not ready for, and the result was the near-total destruction of the race. Their story serves as a warning that echoes through every generation. There are boundaries meant to be respected, There are lines not meant to be crossed. There are unions not meant to be consummated. And when those boundaries are violated, even by angels, even with good intentions, even for love, the consequences are catastrophic. The demons that roam the earth today, according to ancient tradition, are the spirits of the Nephilim. They remember being physical. They crave bodies. They seek to possess humans, to experience flesh again, to recreate the hybrid existence they lost. And the watchers, imprisoned in darkness, wait. They wait for Judgment Day. They wait for the moment when they will be brought before God, condemned, and cast into the lake of fire prepared for the devil and his angels. 200 angels who abandoned heaven for human women, who thought love or lust was worth divine wrath, who corrupted an entire world and damned themselves forever. Their choice, their consequences, their eternal regret, and so the forbidden chapter closes. 200 angels, who were meant to protect humanity instead, became its greatest corruptors. Watchers who abandoned their sacred duty for forbidden desire. Celestial beings who chose temporary pleasure over eternal glory. Why was this story removed from most Bibles? Why did the church councils decide that the book of Enoch, quoted in the New Testament itself, was too dangerous for believers to read? Perhaps because it reveals truths too uncomfortable to accept. That angels can fall not just from pride like Lucifer, but from lust. That corruption can come not just through obvious rebellion, but through seemingly innocent desire. That the greatest catastrophes often begin with a single compromise, a small violation, a boundary crossed just once. The watchers thought they could control their descent. Samyaza organized them, made them take an oath, tried to create safety in numbers. But sin cannot be managed, evil cannot be contained. Once the boundary was crossed, the corruption spread like cancer until the entire world was infected. Their legacy lives on, in the demons that plague humanity, in the legends of giants that every culture remembers, in the forbidden knowledge that still tempts us, the desire to know what we shouldn't know, to do what we shouldn't do, to cross boundaries we're meant to respect. But there is a deeper, more disturbing question that this story raises. How many boundaries are we crossing today? What forbidden unions are we celebrating? What knowledge are we pursuing without wisdom? What technologies are we developing without understanding the consequences? The Watchers taught warfare, and humanity created weapons that can destroy the planet. They taught vanity, and we live in an age obsessed with appearance and image. They taught astrology, and we consult horoscopes instead of prayer. They taught genetic manipulation, and today we edit DNA, clone animals, and play God with the building blocks of life. Perhaps the story of the Watchers was banned not because it's irrelevant, but because it's too relevant, too exposing, too prophetic. The book of Enoch ends with a promise. The Watchers will be judged. The Nephilim will not return. The demons will be cast out. And one day, the corruption they introduced will be purged from the earth forever. But until that day, the battle continues. The demons still seek bodies to possess. The bloodlines they polluted still echo in human genetics. And the forbidden knowledge they taught still tempts us to cross lines we were meant to respect. 200 angels fell for human women, and in doing so, they nearly destroyed the world. The question is not whether angels can fall. They can. They did. The question is, what are we falling for? What are we willing to sacrifice for temporary pleasure, for forbidden knowledge, for power we're not meant to have? The Watchers made their choice. They abandoned heaven. They corrupted earth. And now they wait in chains of darkness for a judgment they know they cannot escape. The truth was never meant to be hidden forever. Now you know why they tried.